Uche and Bissy had everything they could ever want, except for one thing, a child. This sorrow casts a shadow over their lives despite their wealth and happiness. They visited countless healers, but nothing worked. They lived in a grand mansion, surrounded by luxury. This sorrow casts a shadow over their lives despite their wealth and happiness. One evening, an old woman appeared at their door as the sun dipped below the horizon. Her eyes glinted with a mysterious light as she spoke. "You seek a child," she said, her voice low and raspy. "There is a way, but it comes at a great cost." Uche and Bissy exchanged worried glances. "What must we do?" Uche asked, his voice trembling. The old woman leaned in closer. "You must sacrifice a woman who is single and has no children. The ritual must take place at midnight, and no one must witness it except the two of you. Only then will Bissy be able to bear her children." Bissy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "A sacrifice? But how can we?" Uche interrupted, his desperation evident. "We have tried everything, Bissy. If this is our only hope, then we must do it." The old woman nodded solemnly. "Desperate times call for desperate measures. But beware, the consequences of deceit are severe." As the old woman left, Uche and Bissy were left in silence, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Uche's mind raced. He was troubled by the idea, but his desperation for a child clouded his judgment. "Uche, what are we going to do?" Bissy whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "We will find a way," Uche replied, his voice firm but his heart filled with dread. "We must do it." The following day Uche wandered through the bustling mall, his mind preoccupied with the old woman's words. He needed to find a woman who was single and childless, someone who could be easily deceived. As he strolled past the shops, his eyes caught sight of a young woman browsing through a rack of dresses. She was beautiful, with a kind smile that lit up her face. Uche felt a pang of guilt but quickly pushed it aside. This was his chance. The young woman was Chidi, a final-year university student. She was eager to finish her studies and start working to support her family. Her father had passed away when she was young, and her mother had struggled to raise her and her siblings. Chidi dreamed of lifting her family out of poverty, and she worked hard to make that dream a reality. Uche approached her with a friendly smile. "Hello, miss. You have a great taste in fashion," he said, trying to strike up a conversation. Chidi looked up, surprised but pleased by the compliment. "Thank you," she replied, her smile widening. "I'm just looking for something nice to wear for my graduation." "Graduation? That's wonderful. You must be very excited," Uche said, genuinely interested. "Yes, I am. I can't wait to finish my studies and start working. My family needs my support," Chidi explained, her eyes shining with determination. Uche saw an opportunity. "You seem like a very kind and hard-working person. My name is Uche, by the way." "I'm Chidi, nice to meet you, Uche," she said, shaking his hand. Over the next few weeks, Uche and Chidi spent a lot of time together. Uche lied to her, saying he was single and wanted to marry her. Chidi believed him and fell in love, thinking he was the solution to her poverty. Uche showered her with clothes, handbags, and money. Chidi was admired by other female students as she never wore an outfit more than twice. All the ladies wanted to be like her. Despite her newfound wealth, Chidi remained humble. She managed to send some money home, and her mother always prayed for her. "May God bless you, my daughter," her mother would say over the phone. "You are our hope. God will always protect you." As Uche and Chidi's relationship grew, Uche's feelings for her deepened. He found himself genuinely caring for her, but he didn't forget his plan. Bissy, his wife, knew about his plan and never got jealous. She was focused on the end goal, having their children. One evening, as Uche and Chidi sat in a cozy cafe, Chidi looked at him with hopeful eyes. "Uche, do you think we'll get married soon?" she asked, her voice filled with anticipation. Uche hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, Chidi. Soon, we will be together forever," he said, though his heart ached with the lie. Chidi's face lit up with joy. She had become the other woman, believing she would soon become a wife. Little did she know, Uche's intentions were far from pure. As the days passed, Uche struggled with his conscience. He cared for Chidi, but the promise of children and riches loomed over him. He knew he had to follow the plan, no matter the cost. It was time for the sacrifices to take place and needed to be carefully planned. The night of the ritual arrived, cloaked in an air of mystery and anticipation. Uche had planned a black tie party at one of their grand mansions, with a theme that required all guests to wear masks. The invitations were exclusive, and the guests arrived in elegant dresses and suits, each receiving a mask at the door to be worn throughout the night. Chidi was brimming with excitement and hope, convinced that tonight would be the night Uche would propose to her. She had spent countless days dreaming about how the proposal would unfold, imagining every detail with a heart full of anticipation. The thought of Uche getting down on one knee and asking her to be his forever filled her with joy and nervous energy. On the evening of the grand event, Chidi dressed in a stunning gown that made her feel like a princess. Her heart fluttered with anticipation as she prepared for what she believed would be one of the most memorable nights of her life. She had come with two of her friends, but Hugo came a little later. She stepped into the mansion. She was awestruck by the opulence that surrounded her. The grand hall was filled with masked guests, all mingling and enjoying the lavish atmosphere. The chandeliers sparkled above, casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed attendees. Bissy, who had been keeping a watchful eye on the proceedings from a distance, had her own plans for the night. She had instructed the waiters to ensure that no guest's glass remained empty, with a particular focus on Chidi's. Bissy's intentions were far from innocent. She had laced Chidi's drinks with a substance that would make her feel weak and dizzy as the night progressed. Unaware of Bissy's malicious intentions, Chidi enjoyed the evening, sipping her drink and mingling with her friends and the other guests. However, as the night wore on, she began to feel increasingly unwell. The room started to spin, and she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Realizing that something was wrong, Chidi excused herself and made her way to the restroom, hoping that a moment alone would help her regain her composure. Unfortunately, the dizziness only worsened, and Chidi found herself struggling to stay on her feet. The overwhelming sensation became too much for her to handle, and she fainted. Two waiters, acting on Bissy's orders, discreetly carried her to a secluded room in the mansion, away from the prying eyes of the other guests. As the clock neared midnight, the guests and staff began to leave the mansion, unaware of the drama that had unfolded. Chidi lay unconscious in the secluded room, her dreams of a magical proposal shattered by Bissy's cruel actions. The night that was supposed to be filled with joy and celebration had turned into a nightmare, leaving Chidi vulnerable and alone. In the grand hall, the last of the guests bid their farewells, oblivious to the events that had transpired. The mansion, once filled with laughter and music, now stood silent and empty, save for the few remaining staff members who were tidying up. Bissy, satisfied with the outcome of her plan, slipped away into the night. Uche and Bissy, their hearts pounding with anticipation, prepared to begin the ritual. They had chosen a hidden room, far from prying eyes, to carry out the sacrifice. Chidi lay unconscious on the bed, unaware of the danger she was in. The room was dimly lit, with flickering candles casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, mingling with the faint aroma of the rich fabrics that adorned the room. Heavy, dark curtains were drawn tightly over the windows, blocking out any light from the outside world and creating an oppressive, almost suffocating atmosphere. The bed where Chidi lay was draped in luxurious, deep red velvet, which seemed to absorb the dim light, making the room feel even darker. The flickering candlelight danced across her still form, casting long, unsettling shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The walls were lined with ancient, ornate tapestries depicting scenes of rituals and sacrifices, adding to the room's ominous feel. A large, intricately carved wooden chest sat in one corner, its lid slightly ajar, revealing strange, ritualistic objects inside. Meanwhile, Chidi's friend, Hugo and Emma, who had accompanied her to the party, grew worried when they couldn't find her. Determined not to leave without her, she searched the mansion room by room. The air was cold, with a chill that seemed to seep into the bones. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft, rhythmic chanting of Uche and Bissy as they performed the ritual. Their voices echoed eerily in the confined space, adding to the sense of dread that permeated the room. The room felt like a place where time stood still, a place where dark deeds were done in secret, far from the eyes of the world. Carefully, she opened the door slightly and saw Chidi lying helplessly on the bed, with Uche and Bissy standing over her, preparing for the ritual. Her friend peered through the door. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in around her, amplifying her fear and urgency. The friend gasped and quickly ran to get help. As she fled, strange things began to happen. The sky outside darkened ominously, and a cold wind swept through the mansion, rattling the windows. Uche hesitated, a sense of dread creeping over him, but the desire for children and wealth pushed him forward. Bissy, sensing his hesitation, whispered urgently, "We must do this, Uche. It's our only chance." Uche nodded, steeling himself. They began the ritual, chanting the incantations the old woman had given them. The air grew colder, and the room seemed to close in around them. Just as they were about to complete the ritual, a loud crash echoed through the mansion, and the door burst open. She came back with Hugo, who was downstairs and had not left the party and was worried about Chidi as well. They both opened the door, their eyes widened in shock. Their faces paled, and their mouths fell open in a silent gasp. Their brows furrowed in a mix of confusion and horror as they took in the scene before her. Chidi motionless on the bed, her face serene but unnaturally still, while Uche and Bissy stood over her, their expressions intense and focused. Their eyes darted between Chidi and the couple, their minds racing to comprehend the situation. Hugo's breathing quickened, and he felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. While Emma's hands trembled as she clutched the doorframe for support, her knuckles turned white. A mix of fear and determination flashed across their faces. They both knew they had to act quickly. Their eyes narrowed with resolve, as they took a deep breath, steeling themselves for what she had to do next. Their expression now was set with a fierce determination to save her friend. Bissy and Uche were caught. "Jesus!" Hugo exclaimed. Uche and Bissy were thrown back by an unseen force, and the candles around them flickered out. This was a chance for Hugo and Emma to carry Chidi out of the mansion. Since it was now early hours of the morning, they waited until dawn to call the police, explaining everything in detail. They all drove to the mansion with the police. Chidi's heart raced as she stood before the small, unassuming house. Just yesterday, it had been a sprawling mansion where she had been held captive. Her friend, Hugo, had bravely rescued her, but now, as she returned with the police, the mansion was gone. What just happened? Hugo and Emma were confused as well. They knocked at the gate, and the gatekeeper asked, "Who are you looking for?" Chidi replied, "The owner of this house, Uche." "Uche who?" asked the gateman. "But where's the mansion?" Chidi asked. The gatekeeper insisted there had never been a mansion, only this small house. He told them he had been working there for 3 years and didn't know anyone named Uche. He had been on duty the previous night and saw nothing unusual. The police were equally baffled. Emma was silent, and Hugo, concern grew as he saw the fear in Chidi's eyes. Chidi spent her days asking herself, was this all real? Or all this was a hallucination? Confusion clouded Chidi's mind. She's still haunted by her experience, never discovering what had truly happened to the mansion. Uche was nowhere to be found. The mansion became a lingering mystery. She found solace in the fact that she was safe, thanks to her friend Hugo, who had rescued her from being sacrificed. Chidi spent her days questioning the reality of her experience. Unable to cope with the anger and confusion. She knew that Hugo had played a crucial role in her survival. She also believed that her mother's prayers had played a crucial role in her survival, whether the mansion existed or not. Reflecting on her ordeal, Chidi, Emma, and Hugo realized that some mysteries were better left unsolved. She decided to return to her village for a while to clear her mind. Hugo and Chidi were from the same village, so he accompanied Chidi to the village to ensure she was safe and supported during this difficult time. Yugo's presence provided comfort as she tried to clear her mind and process the strange events that had unfolded. Together, they hoped to find some peace and clarity away from the confusion and fear that had gripped them in the city. Chidi and Yugo's friendship blossomed into a deep love. Yugo's unwavering support and bravery during her darkest moments forged a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. Now, Chidi is preparing to marry Yugo, filled with gratitude for his courage and steadfast presence in her life. The ritual Bissy and Uche performed had gone wrong. Instead of gaining children and more riches, Uche found himself cursed. Both of them suffered the curse. One night Uche found himself in a state of sheer panic, his heart pounding in his chest as he struggled to understand what was happening to him. The evening had started as normal, but it quickly descended into a nightmare that left him feeling helpless and humiliated. His mind raced with confusion and fear, unable to grasp why his body was betraying him at such a crucial moment. Whenever Uche tried to be with Bissy, his manhood seemed to vanish, leaving him feeling emasculated and deeply ashamed. This unexpected and distressing situation struck a severe blow to his ego. Uche had always prided himself on his confidence and strength, but now he felt stripped of his dignity and self-worth. The more he tried to regain control, the more elusive it became, compounding his sense of failure. The panic that gripped Uche was not just about the physical symptoms he was experiencing, it was also about the emotional and psychological toll it took on him. He felt a profound sense of inadequacy, as if he had lost a fundamental part of his identity. The fear of being judged or ridiculed by Bissy only intensified his anxiety, making it nearly impossible for him to think clearly or act rationally. Bissy, on the other hand, was equally devastated. She had been hopeful that the old woman's advice would bring them closer together, but instead, it had turned into a curse. Watching Uche struggle and suffer was heartbreaking for her. She felt a deep sense of guilt and regret, realizing that her actions, though well-intentioned, had led to this disastrous outcome. The bond they shared was now strained by the weight of this unforeseen curse, and Bissy was at a loss for how to make things right. The old woman's advice, which Bissy had followed in the hope of strengthening their relationship, had backfired spectacularly. Instead of bringing them closer, it had driven a wedge between them, creating a chasm of fear and insecurity. Bissy's realization that the advice was a curse, not a blessing, filled her with a sense of dread. She feared that their relationship might never recover from this ordeal. As the night wore on, Uche's panic showed no signs of abating. He felt trapped in a cycle of fear and impotence, unable to break free from the grip of the curse. His mind was a whirlwind of negative thoughts, each one chipping away at his confidence and self-esteem. The more he dwelled on his predicament, the more powerless he felt, and the more his ego suffered. In the quiet moments of the night, Uche and Bissy were left to confront the harsh reality of their situation. The curse had not only affected Uche's physical state but had also cast a long shadow over their emotional and psychological well-being. They both knew that overcoming this challenge would require more than just time, it would demand patience, understanding, and a willingness to face their fears together. Uche's state of panic and the impact on his ego were profound, leaving him feeling vulnerable and exposed. Bissy's devastation and realization of the curse's true nature added to the complexity of their predicament. Together, they faced an uncertain future, hoping to find a way to break free from the curse and rebuild their relationship on a foundation of trust and resilience. They both knew that overcoming this challenge would require more than just time, it would demand patience, understanding, and a willingness to face their fears together. Desperate to break the curse, Uche and Bissy decided to find the old woman. They retraced their steps to the market where they thought someone might know her. The market was bustling, but the old woman was nowhere to be found. They asked around, describing her to anyone who would listen, but no one seemed to know who she was. Days turned into weeks, and their search grew more frantic. They visited every corner of the city, from the crowded streets to the quiet alleys, but the old woman remained elusive. Uche's condition worsened, and Bissy's despair deepened. One evening, as they sat in a small cafe, exhausted and hopeless, a stranger approached them. He was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. She had overheard their conversation and offered to help. She explained that the old woman they sought was a powerful sorceress known for her deceptive ways. She often moved from place to place, leaving a trail of curses behind her. The stranger gave them a small, intricately carved box and instructed them to open it only in the presence of the old woman. Inside, he said, was the key to breaking the curse. Uche and Bissy looked at each other, their minds asking, should we trust another old woman again? Last time we trusted an old woman who got us into trouble, but with renewed hope, Uche and Bissy continued their search, now with a sense of purpose. After months of relentless searching, Uche and Bissy finally found the old woman in a remote village. She was sitting by a crackling fire. The old woman's hut, made of weathered wood and thatch, stood at the edge of a small clearing dotted with wildflowers and overgrown shrubs. The village was deep within a dense forest, far from the outside world. Tall trees formed a natural canopy, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of moss and damp leaves. As Uche and Bissy approached her cautiously, holding the mysterious box tightly, Uche's heart pounded with a mix of anger and anticipation. He knew that one wrong move could spell disaster. The curse would remain unbroken if they provoked her wrath. The old woman's skin was a tapestry of deep wrinkles, her hair a wild cascade of silver. Her eyes gleamed with a mix of wisdom and mischief. She wore layers of tattered, colorful fabrics, and her hands, though gnarled and weathered, moved with surprising grace as she tended to the fire. As they stood before her, the air grew cooler, and a sense of foreboding hung heavy. The fate of their quest hung by a thread, and the very land seemed aware of the gravity of their mission. The old woman laughed when she saw them, acknowledging the curse she had placed. She agreed to lift it, but only if they could solve a riddle. With determination, they listened to her riddle, which was, I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with wind. What am I? After much thought, they provided the correct answer. Uche and Bissy realized the answer was an echo. The old woman smiled and instructed them to open the box. They were able to open the box and lift the curse. Inside was a small vial of shimmering liquid. She told them to drink it together, and as they did, the curse was lifted. Uche's manhood was restored, and their lives began to return to normal but still remain childless. Meanwhile, Chidi and Hugo were planning their wedding when Chidi began experiencing frequent bouts of nausea. Concerned, Hugo suggested a visit to the doctor. To their astonishment, the doctor congratulated them on the pregnancy. Chidi was shocked, knowing she hadn't been intimate with Hugo, so how can she be pregnant? She then realized the baby must be Uche's. Chidi was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions upon discovering her pregnancy. The news of the pregnancy was a double-edged sword. While he was excited about the prospect of a child, the knowledge that the baby was not his own was a bitter pill to swallow. Knowing that she was carrying a child from a ritualist filled her with dread and confusion. Every kick and flutter from the baby reminded her of the trauma she had endured. She felt a deep sense of betrayal by her own body, which now harbored a constant reminder of her ordeal. The fear of the unknown and the stigma associated with her situation weighed heavily on her mind. She often found herself in tears, grappling with the reality of her circumstances and the future of her unborn child. Hugo, on the other hand, was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. He was heartbroken for Chidi, seeing the woman he loved in such distress. Despite the turmoil, Hugo reassured her, promising to marry her and keep the secret. Hugo's love for Chidi was unwavering, but the situation tested his patience and resilience. He struggled with feelings of inadequacy and jealousy, knowing that another man, especially a ritualist, had fathered the child. Their relationship was strained under the weight of these revelations. Trust and communication became challenging as both tried to navigate their complex emotions. Hugo's attempts to reassure Chidi often fell short, as her anxiety and guilt overshadowed his words. Despite his promise to stand by her, the unspoken tension between them grew. They found solace in fleeting moments of normalcy, but the underlying issues were never far from the surface. As Chidi's pregnancy progressed, the couple faced numerous challenges. Hugo's unwavering support was a beacon of hope for Chidi, but the emotional toll on both of them was evident. Chidi's water had broken unexpectedly, and Hugo, despite his own panic, took charge, determined to get her to the hospital safely. The drive was tense, with Hugo trying to reassure Chidi while navigating the busy streets. However, fate had other plans. As they sped through an intersection, a truck collided with their car, sending it spinning out of control. The impact was devastating, leaving both Chidi and Hugo critically injured. When Chidi regained consciousness in the hospital, her first instinct was to ask about her baby. Her voice, weak and filled with desperation, echoed through the sterile room. The doctor approached her with a somber expression, delivering the news that her baby boy was alive and healthy. Relief washed over Chidi momentarily, but it was quickly overshadowed by the news when he mentioned that Hugo didn't make it. A whirlwind of emotions engulfed her. The initial shock was paralyzing. Her mind struggled to process the contrasting news, the joy of her baby's survival clashing violently with the grief of losing Hugo. It felt as if her heart was being torn in two directions, each pulling with an unbearable force. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing in as her breath quickened and her vision blurred with tears. Chidi's relationship with Hugo had been complex. He was not just a partner but a significant part of her life, someone she had shared dreams and fears with. Losing him in such a sudden and tragic manner left a void that seemed impossible to fill. The pain of his absence was a constant, gnawing ache, a reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of fate. As she held her baby, Chidi felt a mix of overwhelming love and deep sorrow. The baby was a symbol of life and hope, yet also a result of a traumatic encounter with another man, who had tried to use her for a ritual. She had to navigate the challenges of single motherhood while dealing with her own trauma and grief. The nights were the hardest, filled with memories of Hugo and the haunting thoughts of what could have been. She often found herself awake, staring at the ceiling, tears silently streaming down her face as she cradled her baby. The stress and emotional turmoil took a toll on Chidi's health. She began to experience severe anxiety, her mind constantly racing with worries about the future. Sleep became elusive, and when it did come, it was often interrupted by nightmares. Her appetite dwindled, leading to significant weight loss and a weakened immune system. The physical manifestations of her grief and stress were evident to those around her, but few understood the depth of her pain. As Chidi's health deteriorated, her body grew weaker with each passing day. The stress and trauma she had endured took a severe toll on her physical well-being. She became frail, her once vibrant energy now a distant memory. Simple tasks became exhausting, and she often found herself confined to bed, struggling to muster the strength to care for her baby. One particularly difficult day, Chidi felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. She knew her time was running out. With trembling hands, she asked the nurse for a pen and paper. The nurse, sensing the gravity of the moment, quickly obliged. Chidi's hands shook as she began to write a letter to Uche, the father of her child. Her words were filled with a mix of sorrow and hope, as she confirmed that the baby was his and implored him to take care of their child after her death. She poured her heart into the letter, expressing her love for the baby and her wish for Uche to provide the care and protection she could no longer offer. After finishing the letter, Chidi felt a strange sense of peace. She had done everything she could to ensure her baby's future. The nurse took the letter, promising to deliver it to Uche. Chidi's condition continued to worsen, and it became clear that she did not have much time left. The doctor knew he had a difficult task ahead. He picked up the phone and dialed Uche's number, his heart heavy with the news he had to deliver. When Uche answered, the doctor spoke gently but firmly, asking him to come to the hospital immediately and to bring his wife, Bissy. The urgency in the doctor's voice made Uche's heart race. He agreed and hung up, turning to Bissy with a look of concern. As they drove to the hospital, Uche and Bissy were filled with anxiety. They speculated about the reason for the sudden call, but neither could have imagined the gravity of the situation. Their conversation was filled with nervous questions and reassurances. Bissy tried to stay positive, suggesting that maybe it was just a routine checkup or some minor issue. Uche, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Upon arriving at the hospital, they were met by the doctor, whose somber expression confirmed their worst fears. He led them to a quiet room and asked them to sit down. The doctor took a deep breath before speaking, his voice steady but filled with compassion. He explained that Chidi's health had taken a severe turn for the worse. Despite their best efforts, she had passed away earlier that day. The news hit Uche and Bissy like a tidal wave. Bissy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Uche felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. He struggled to process the information, his mind reeling with shock and grief. This mind raced with a mix of emotions, shock, grief, and a deep sense of responsibility. He had not been prepared for this moment, and the thought of losing Chidi was almost too much to bear. Despite their complicated past, Uche had always cared for her, and the news of her impending death hit him hard. Chidi's death left a void in Uche's heart, but it also ignited a fierce determination to be the best father he could be. He was committed to fulfilling Chidi's final request. The doctor continued, explaining that Chidi had left a letter for Uche, confirming that the baby was his and asking him to take care of the child. Uche's hands trembled as he took the letter, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. The weight of Chidi's final request settled heavily on his shoulders. He felt a mix of sorrow and responsibility, knowing that he had to honor her wishes. As they sat in stunned silence, a nurse entered the room, cradling the baby in her arms. The sight of the child brought a fresh wave of emotions. Bissy's tears flowed freely as she reached out to hold the baby, her heart breaking for the little one who had lost its mother. Uche felt a surge of protectiveness and determination. He knew that he had to be strong for the baby's sake. The nurse, who had been caring for Chidi in her final days, felt a deep sense of sorrow as she saw Chidi lying peacefully in her bed. She had grown attached to Chidi and admired her strength and resilience. Seeing her now, at rest, brought a bittersweet sense of closure. The nurse knew that Chidi had fought hard, but she also knew that Chidi's suffering had finally ended. Uche and Bissy left the hospital with heavy hearts, but also with a renewed sense of purpose. They vowed to give the baby all the love and care that Chidi had wished for. The journey ahead would be challenging, but they were determined to honor Chidi's memory and provide a loving home for the child. The doctor's compassionate words and the nurse's gentle care had given them the strength to face the future, knowing that they were not alone in their grief. As time passed, Uche and Bissy found a rhythm in their new roles. They celebrated the baby's milestones and created new family traditions. They honored Chidi's memory by sharing stories about her, ensuring that the child would grow up knowing about their mother's strength and love. The couple also made sure to take care of their own well-being, recognizing that they needed to be healthy and strong to provide the best care for the baby. Uche and Bissy's relationship grew stronger as they navigated the challenges of parenthood together. They learned to communicate more effectively, supporting each other through moments of doubt and exhaustion. Their shared commitment to the baby's well-being became the foundation of their partnership. In the end, Uche and Bissy's journey was one of resilience, love, and growth. They transformed their grief into a source of strength, creating a nurturing and loving home for the baby. Their story is a testament to the power of love and the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity. Through their dedication and unwavering support for each other, they built a new life filled with hope and promise for the future. In essence, the story of Uche and Bissy is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience, love, and growth. It reminds us that even in the face of profound loss and unexpected challenges, we can find strength, support, and hope. By embracing these lessons, we can navigate our own lives with greater compassion, integrity, and resilience. When we are faced with adversity, try to maintain a positive outlook. Focus on what you can control and take proactive steps to address. Thank you for watching. Granny G Stories. Feel free to subscribe for more stories.